Greetings, brave wanderer of the internet. Where are you watching this from? A quiet mountain town, a sun-baked desert city, or somewhere in between? Let me know in the comments. And if this video adds a spark to your day, why not share the spark with someone else? The smartwatch should have been nothing more than a dead relic by now. It had sat forgotten in a cluttered drawer for more than 3 months, tossed among old chargers and gadgets Chloe had written off as obsolete. But somehow, at exactly 2:47 in the morning, it buzzed awake in my palm while I was digging through the junk for AA batteries. The screen came to life with a message from someone named Damon. Can't wait to taste heaven again tomorrow night. I dropped my mug. It smashed on the linoleum, shards scattering like the fractured pieces of my chest. I tapped the screen and began scrolling. It wasn't just one text. There were dozens. Weeks' worth of intimate conversations. Photos that scorched themselves into my memory. Angles and acts my wife had never once shared with me in nearly a decade of marriage. And Damon, young enough to pass for a college intern, was filling my 32-year-old wife's inbox with graphic fantasies, explicit and unfiltered. "Nate?" Her voice floated out from the bedroom. "You okay out there?" I shut the smartwatch off, swept the broken ceramic into a dustpan, and walked back down the hallway like nothing had changed. But something had. Everything had. The woman snoring softly beside me, her Bible notes spread across the nightstand, wasn't who I thought I'd married. "Dropped something," I mumbled. She shifted under the covers, half-conscious, then turned over. I lay there watching her, this woman whose face I'd kissed every morning for years. And suddenly it felt like I was looking at a stranger wearing Chloe's face. Dawn came too quickly. Chloe was in the kitchen, radiant in a yellow dress with sunflower prints, humming a worship song while she packed lunch for the youth group event. "You're awfully chipper today," I said, stirring sugar into a mug of coffee. She beamed. "God's been nudging me to invest more time in guiding the young men at church." Her smile, that same one that once made me fall hard, hadn't lost its charm. "There's a sweet kid, Damon Rivers. Pastor Rivers' son. He's having a tough time lately." The coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "Tough how?" I asked. "You know how it is. Boys that age get lost, struggle with identity. I've been helping him sort out some stuff with his dad." "Helping? Sure." How noble of her. She leaned in and pressed a kiss to my forehead, then grabbed her purse. "Don't wait up," she added breezily. "The meeting could go late." I stood at the front window, arms crossed, and watched her Honda Civic disappear down Maple Street. Then I picked up the phone and called Frank. Told him I was out sick. He wouldn't be happy. We had a packed schedule, but I needed the day. The smartwatch now rested on the kitchen table like a piece of damning evidence. I turned it back on and started saving everything. Every message, every photo, all of it. My hands trembled as I scrolled through page after page of betrayal. Damon Rivers. According to Instagram, he was 23. The pastor's boy, the golden child of the youth ministry. He looked like someone you'd find on a fitness magazine cover. Toned, confident, young. Basically everything I wasn't. My phone vibrated. "Luis. Still breathing, hermano?" Frank's flipping out. "I'm fine. Just handling some stuff. Beer later? You sound wrecked." "Rain check. Got research to do." Trinity Baptist stood proudly on the corner of 5th and Main, our town's gleaming symbol of morality. Chloe and I had been part of that congregation for 6 years. I'd tithed 10% of every paycheck while Pastor Rivers preached fidelity and marital faith from a handcrafted pulpit. I parked across the street and waited. The youth group meeting was supposed to end by 9. At 9:15, teenagers started spilling out. By 9:30, Chloe appeared. And right beside her was Damon. They lingered in the parking lot, too close, too casual. I saw his hand brush against her arm twice before they finally split off. He walked to a red Mustang. She got in her Civic. I followed him. The Mustang pulled into the lot of the Riverside Motel just beyond the edge of town, a rundown place with hourly rates and a reputation for discretion. He parked outside room 12 and waited. 15 minutes later, Chloe's car arrived. She parked next to him. I crouched low behind a faded billboard promoting the local casino, concealed in its shadow. From that vantage point, I saw my wife of nearly a decade walking arm in arm with a boy who looked more like a college freshman than a man, heading into a seedy roadside motel like it was routine. Moments later, the room's lights snapped off. Just like that, I watched the life I had built dissolve in real time. The rational move would have been to start the truck and drive home. The mature response might have been to consult a divorce lawyer the next morning. Instead, I sat in that cab for 2 straight hours, calmly collecting evidence with my phone like a private investigator. I zoomed in on license plates, logged every movement with timestamps, snapped angles that a judge wouldn't be able to ignore. When they eventually came out, avoiding eye contact, smoothing their clothes like actors after a bad rehearsal, I was ready. "How was the meeting?" I asked later, when Chloe slid into bed just before midnight, quiet as a whisper. "Draining," she murmured, sinking into the mattress. "So many kids are dealing with serious struggles." She snuggled close, still carrying the scent of motel soap and unfamiliar cologne. "Damon really opened up tonight," she added, almost proudly. "He's finally beginning to let go of his burdens and lean on his faith." "That's wonderful, honey." She drifted off within minutes. I lay awake, eyes locked on the ceiling, mapping out the next steps in silence until the morning sun broke through the blinds. That Sunday, for the first time in 3 months, I returned to Trinity Baptist. I slid into the pew beside her like I'd never left, and Chloe nearly choked on her communion wine. Her voice was a frantic whisper. "Why are you here?" "I felt like praising today," I said softly. "Is that a problem?" Pastor Rivers delivered a sermon on forgiveness, mercy, and starting fresh. And right there in the front row sat his star pupil, his son Damon, nodding along with the intensity of a man playing the part of faithful servant. He spotted me across the sanctuary and offered a cheerful smile, even waved. I smiled right back. After the service, Chloe tugged me toward the fellowship hall with a little too much enthusiasm. "There's someone you've got to meet," she said with forced brightness. Damon approached like a politician, grinning wide, hand outstretched, every inch the golden boy. "You're Nate, right?" "I've heard so much about you," he said warmly. "Hope it was all flattering," I replied, shaking his hand harder than necessary. "She said you do HVAC?" he asked, smile twitching. "Yep, it's got its moments. Bet it's interesting, getting a glimpse into people's homes and lives." That smile faltered just for a second. "Damon's been such an asset to the youth program," Chloe chimed in. "He's got this special way of connecting with the kids." "I'm sure he does." Midweek, Chloe announced she'd be gone for the weekend, chaperoning a discipleship retreat up at Camp Galilee, about 2 hours north. "It's focused on spiritual growth," she said, folding her jeans and t-shirts into a duffel bag. "Sounds intense," I said. "You should come. We could use help with the maintenance side." I knew that camp like it was my own backyard. Every creaky step, every shortcut through the trees, every blind spot the security cameras couldn't catch. So I showed up Friday evening in my work truck, stocked with the usual gear and a few extras I didn't normally use on HVAC jobs. That weekend's theme? Purity and purpose. 40-something teenagers and young adults showed up, ready for a weekend of worship music, devotions, and what Chloe called genuine spiritual fellowship. I kept busy fixing things, replacing the busted water heater in cabin 7, rewiring faulty lights in the mess hall, unclogging the girls' shower drains. Just reliable, dependable Nate, keeping the retreat running while my wife and her prodigy kindled their private revival. That night, from the cover of the maintenance shed, I saw them by the edge of the fire pit, leaning in close, whispering, brushing hands, sharing something they didn't want seen. At midnight, I made my move to cabin 12. The blinds were shut tight, but I had a master key. I crept inside and planted a high-grade audio recorder behind a loose outlet cover, bought with cash from a no-name shop 2 counties away, and slipped out just as quietly. Then I waited. Saturday brought the evidence I needed. 3 solid hours of recorded audio. I downloaded and listened with my earbuds in, my hands shaking, my jaw clenched. 3 hours of her calling out his name, 3 hours of laughter, breathless moans, and whispered betrayals. It wasn't just an affair, it was a blueprint. "I'm telling you, he's too dumb to figure it out," Chloe's voice hissed in my ears. Small-town HVAC guys don't understand prenups or how marital assets work. What about the house? Damon asked. She'll claim emotional trauma, the message read. Say he drinks too much, gets aggressive when cornered. The judge will award spousal support, and I'll walk away with half the house. Once the divorce is settled and the money's handled, we won't have to hide anymore. My parents will come around eventually. I shut off the smartwatch and slid it into my pocket, then made my way toward the main lodge for breakfast. Chloe sat among the women leading the retreat, engrossed in conversation about that morning's devotional, ironically centered around marital faithfulness. Damon, meanwhile, was holding court with a group of teenage boys, walking them through lessons on godly love and building meaningful, respectful relationships. It might have been comical, if it wasn't unraveling my life thread by thread. Good morning, I greeted as I approached their table, thermos in hand. Nate. Chloe stood quickly and gave me a hug. You're up early. Didn't get much sleep, I said. Kept hearing strange noises near the cabins. Probably just mice, someone offered. Or something bigger, I said, keeping my tone light. Damon stiffened, fork frozen midair. Figure I should check the walls later, I added. Make sure nothing's gotten inside where it shouldn't be. That'd be a blessing, Pastor Rivers called out from a nearby table. We're grateful for your vigilance in safeguarding the Lord's house. Just doing what needs doing, Pastor, I replied. Some things need patching up, others need pulling out. The real reckoning came that Sunday afternoon. I was tossing equipment into the back of my truck when Damon marched up from the maintenance shed. Gone was his clean-cut, affable demeanor, replaced by something sharper, colder. We need to have a conversation, he said. About what? I replied, not looking at him. About you sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. I set the toolbox down and turned to face him fully. Up close, he wasn't quite so intimidating, muscle bulked from protein shakes and gym mirrors, but no real steel in his eyes. Funny thing about maintenance work, I said. You hear things, you catch things. People forget you're even there. That supposed to scare me? Not at all. Just making a point. Same way I made one about you sleeping with my wife. His expression hardened. Chloe and I share a bond. Something sacred. Something you clearly don't understand. Sacred? I snorted. That what you call it when you're panting over her in a motel room? He stepped closer, close enough to smell his aftershave. You're pathetic. Just a washed-out laborer who couldn't keep his wife from looking elsewhere. Maybe, I replied. But I'm not the one hiding lust behind scripture and preying on vulnerable women under the guise of ministry. She came to me, Nate, he said. She's been unhappy for a long time. You were just too wrapped up in yourself to notice. His punch came out of nowhere, snapping my head back and splitting my lip. But I'd taken worse, on construction sites and roadside bars. I knew how to take a hit and return it with interest. I slammed him back against the shed wall, scattering wrenches and paint cans, then drove my fists into his gut. He flailed, trying to land wild punches. I stayed close, focused, relentless. He had youth and ego. I had pain, experience, and nothing left to lose. When it was done, he lay coughing in the dirt, blood dripping from his nose. My jaw throbbed, and my lip bled freely. Keep away from my wife, I said flatly. He looked up with a smirk, lips stained red. Bit late for that. She's already chosen. I turned and walked away before I let rage do something worse. The consequences landed the next morning. A grainy video hit social media. Security footage of two men throwing punches behind the maintenance shed. Someone had uploaded it to the church's Facebook page, captioned, "Altercation at Youth Retreat." At 6 a.m., my phone vibrated. Chloe. Her tone was ice. What the hell happened? I defended myself. Pastor Rivers wants to see us. Today? Later that afternoon, we sat in his office, a room lined with scripture commentaries, framed photos, and heavy oak furniture. Damon sat beside his father, face bruised and partially wrapped in gauze. Chloe took a seat across the room, as far from me as the space allowed. This is a deeply troubling situation, Pastor Rivers began gently. Violence has no place in our fellowship. Your son threw the first punch, I said calmly. Damon claims you threatened him, Pastor Rivers said, his lips pressed in a tight line. I told him to stay away from my wife, I answered, my tone flat. That's a serious charge, Nate. And this is a serious mess, Chloe cut in before I could speak again. Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. Nate's been having paranoid episodes lately. He needs therapy. Paranoid? I murmured as I slipped my hand into my pocket. Without another word, I opened my phone and pulled up the files, screenshots from the smartwatch, messages, images, full conversations. You're calling this paranoia? I said, handing the phone over. Rivers went pale as he scrolled through the evidence. Damon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Chloe stared at the table. This is deeply unsettling, Pastor Rivers eventually whispered. What troubles you more? I asked. That your son slept with a married woman, or that your church is protecting the affair? We'll need to take time and pray over this, he muttered. Be my guest, I said, standing up. Meanwhile, I'll be talking with my lawyer. I had almost reached the door when Chloe spoke. Don't make this uglier than it has to be, Nate. I turned back. Too late. The only thing left to decide is how ugly it gets. By Thursday, the legal wheels were already in motion. The paperwork came all at once: restraining order, separation notice, and a temporary spousal support petition. It was obvious Chloe had legal assistance. Most likely Gerald Hoffman, church deacon and resident legal expert. The court order barred me from contacting her or approaching within 500 feet of the house I'd been paying off for 6 years. I packed whatever I could fit into my truck and moved into the small apartment above Luis's bar. A modest studio, 2 rooms, the air thick with the scent of smoke and disinfectant. Everything I owned now sat in the bed of my pickup. This won't stand forever, Luis said as he helped me drag boxes up the narrow staircase. You're going to fight back, right? With what money? I said. Hoffman's probably doing it free of charge. I can't even afford a consultation. So what's your plan? I popped open a beer and sank into the lumpy old couch. Let them believe they've already won. Luis stared at me. That doesn't sound like you? Exactly. Over the next 2 weeks, I played the role they'd written for me, disheveled, defeated, unraveling. I showed up to work looking rough, unkempt, and distracted. Every evening, I drank at Luis's place, loud, careless, and visibly broken. Let the gossip spread fast. Nate Collins, poor guy, he's falling apart. But beneath the surface, I was working. Turned up evidence that Gerald Hoffman had been quietly embezzling from the building fund for 3 years. Discovered that Pastor Rivers was inflating attendance records to secure bonuses from the denominational board. And dug into Damon's past. Found out he had a sealed juvenile record back in California. The specifics were murky, but enough to raise alarm bells for any church leader. Information was power, and I was collecting ammunition. The church's big fundraising gala was slated for the first Saturday in November. Formal dinner, dance floor, auction tables, and plenty of mingling. Chloe had signed up to manage the youth ministry booth. I went online and bought myself a ticket. You've lost your damn mind, Luis said when I told him. It's a public event, I replied. The restraining order doesn't apply. Still sounds like a suicide run. No, I said. This is a move I planned. That same afternoon, I stepped into Men's Warehouse and bought my first tailored suit in 10 years. Navy blue, crisp white shirt, a clean tie. Got a trim, cleaned up the beard. When I left the shop, I looked like someone who had never been broken. The gala was being hosted at Riverside Country Club, same venue where Chloe and I had celebrated our wedding 8 years ago. I walked in alone, ordered myself a drink at the bar, and settled into a seat tucked away near the back of the hall. Roughly 20 minutes later, Chloe entered with Damon by her side, her arm looped through his, dressed in a red outfit I'd never seen before. The two of them moved confidently from group to group, smiling, shaking hands, basking in compliments about their ministry work like they were running for office. Pastor Rivers eventually took the stage to deliver his keynote, speaking about the vital role of guiding young Christians in their spiritual development. When we pour into the next generation, he said, we're investing in the future of the church. The audience responded with applause. I clapped politely, wearing the kind of smile you put on when you're just playing along. At 8 o'clock sharp, the silent auction began. I made bids on a few items: a weekend getaway at a lake cabin, a fancy dinner for two at a nice Italian place, and a signed football from the local high school squad. None of it mattered to me. I wasn't there to win prizes. I was there to be seen. By 9:30, I approached Damon at the youth outreach table. "Big turnout tonight," I said with a calm tone. He looked up from the pile of donation envelopes he was organizing. "What are you doing here?" he asked stiffly. "Supporting global missions," I replied casually. "Same as the rest of you." Chloe appeared beside him, her expression tight. "You should leave," she said. "Why?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "I paid for a ticket. I haven't violated any restraining order. I'm just another concerned member of the congregation doing my part for overseas outreach." "You're making people uneasy," she snapped. "No," I corrected her. "I'm making you uneasy." "That's a different thing." Pastor Rivers suddenly stepped up next to me. "Nate, perhaps it would be best if you excused yourself," he said gently. "I understand, Pastor," I said with a nod. "But I have every right to be here." I turned my gaze back to Damon. "How's the youth fundraising going tonight?" "We've had plenty of support," he answered through clenched teeth. "Good to hear," I said. "Always encouraging to witness the generosity of the faithful." I picked up one of the donation envelopes from the table. Take Gerald Hoffman, for example. Always eager to give back to the church. I paused before adding, "Of course, it's a lot easier to be generous when you're handing out someone else's money." Pastor Rivers narrowed his eyes. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "Probably nothing," I said with a casual shrug. "Just thinking out loud. Old accountant habits. I'm sure Gerald would be happy to explain the little hiccups in the building fund reports, if anyone thought to ask." Gerald, who was close enough to hear everything, visibly blanched. "Are you accusing me of something?" Pastor Rivers demanded. "I'm merely pointing out a few things," I replied. "Like how attendance numbers sometimes get adjusted, particularly when bonus incentives are in play, or how certain sealed juvenile records have a way of coming up again when people start poking around." Damon stepped forward. "You're out of line." "Or maybe," I said calmly, "I'm just voicing the things others have been too afraid to say." A small crowd had gathered now, drawn by the rising tension. People leaned in closer, sensing something was about to break. "What things?" Chloe demanded. "Like whether the congregation is aware that their youth pastor has a sealed record back in California," I said. "Or whether the church board gave its blessing to your so-called counseling sessions held at the Riverside Motel." A ripple of shocked gasps ran through the growing group. Someone's phone flashed, capturing the moment. "You're making this up," Damon barked. "Am I?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "Maybe we should ask Veronica Henderson. She tends to take photos on her evening runs. The motel's parking lot happens to be visible from the trail by the river. Over the last 2 weeks, I'd carefully fed Veronica just the right tidbits, strategically placed whispers about Chloe and Damon's secret meetings. In communities like ours, gossip traveled faster than gospel. "That's enough," Pastor Rivers said firmly. "I think you should leave now." "I was already on my way out," I replied. Straightening my tie, I turned to the room with a pleasant nod. "Lovely evening, everyone." Quite the eye-opener. I was nearly at the door when Damon called after me. "You really think you're clever, don't you?" I turned to face him squarely. "Compared to what, exactly?" "You're nothing, Nate. A worthless man who couldn't even keep his wife satisfied." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'm not a coward preaching morality while hiding behind his father's pulpit." That was when he snapped. Damon lunged across the youth table, scattering donation envelopes and glossy church pamphlets. His shoulder slammed into my chest, and we both went crashing into the silent auction setup. We slammed down onto a table overflowing with raffled gift baskets, restaurant vouchers, and handmade crafts. Guests gasped and screamed, backing away as we rolled on the polished floor, exchanging wild, frantic blows. But I was ready this time. I intercepted his swing, caught his wrist, twisted it behind his back, and drove my knee into his ribs. He groaned in agony, tried to twist out of my grip, but I held fast, the adrenaline and fury driving me forward. "Let go of him!" Chloe shouted, her voice sharp and panicked. I ignored her. I yanked Damon to his feet and shoved him toward the double doors leading outside. He kicked and cursed, but I had 50 pounds on him and years of physical labor behind me. "Where are we going?" he gasped. Sunday school, I muttered. Outside, the country club's patio was decorated for autumn. Plastic jack-o'-lanterns, tied bundles of dried corn, and strands of fairy lights strung between umbrella poles. The pool had been drained for the season, except for a shallow pool of rainwater and dead leaves swirling at the bottom. Exactly what I needed. I shoved him toward the edge. You want to act like a preacher? Fine. Let's have ourselves a baptism. You're insane. Maybe, I said, but I'm through being laughed at. He tried to run, but I caught him by the collar and yanked him back. We grappled on the slick tile while, behind us, the crowd pressed up against the glass doors, watching as if it were a stage show. This won't solve anything, Damon shouted. Maybe not, I replied, but I'll finally sleep tonight. Grabbing both his belt and collar, I lifted him clean off the ground and flung him into the shallow water. The splash echoed like a gunshot, loud enough to turn every head across the club grounds. He came up sputtering, his designer suit clinging to his skin, his hair dripping and tangled with wet leaves, looking like some soaked martyr. Feeling redeemed yet? I called down to him. He tried to climb out, but I planted my boot on his chest and shoved him back into the water. Stay there, I told him, until you learn the difference between ministry and manipulation. Behind me, the crowd at the windows had doubled. Dozens of phones were raised, recording from every angle. By morning, the video would be viral. The golden boy of Trinity Baptist, publicly dunked like an unruly teen at church camp. You're going to regret this, he coughed out. I already do, I said. You took my wife, my home, and ruined my reputation. But there's one thing you don't get to steal. He squinted through the water. What's that? My self-respect. I just took it back. I turned my back to him, walked past the stunned crowd, pushed open the doors, and crossed the lot without looking back. Behind me, Damon finally pulled himself out of the water, soaked and humiliated. Chloe ran to him with a towel, fussing over him like he was the wounded victim. They looked pitiful, her with her deceit, him with his disgrace, clinging to each other, trying to salvage what little pride remained. The fallout came fast. By Sunday, the poolside footage had been shared over 800 times on Facebook. By Monday evening, the local news stations were running it in prime time. By Tuesday, Trinity Baptist's governing board demanded a formal review. Gerald Hoffman abruptly resigned from the deacon board after a surprise audit uncovered suspicious bookkeeping. Pastor Rivers declared a sudden sabbatical, saying he needed time for spiritual reflection about his son's calling. Damon was promptly removed from all youth ministry positions, pending a formal investigation into his actions. Chloe responded by filing a new set of complaints against me, alleging assault, harassment, and causing a public disturbance. But the video told a different story. It clearly captured Damon as the aggressor, and several eyewitnesses supported my claim of self-defense. At last, the whispers and rumors had something concrete to latch onto. Thanks to Veronica Henderson's tireless gossip mill, a few women from the church stepped forward with stories about Damon and Chloe's not-so-innocent behavior, late-night strategy sessions, hands lingering too long during prayer, and mysterious overnight trips that were never part of the church's youth calendar. The restraining order had been revised, granting me access to my own home once again. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings hit a snag. Chloe's legal team was busy trying to contain the growing public backlash. I returned to the house on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. It didn't feel like home anymore, somehow smaller, like it had contracted in my absence, as if even the walls were holding their breath. All of her things were gone. The shelves were marked with empty gaps, and the walls were bare where her framed pieces once hung. In the bedroom closet, I spotted a lone cardboard box labeled Donations. Inside, I found some outdated electronics, my first ever smartphone, a damaged tablet, and the smartwatch that had exposed everything. Beneath those sat a newer device I didn't recognize. It was sleek, Chloe's burner phone. I powered it on. 17 voicemails, all from Damon, all left within the last month. I listened to each one after the other. We can't let him beat us, babe. Once the divorce is through, we'll go down to Florida. My dad's got people there. Spoke to the lawyer again. If you say he was emotionally abusive, the judge will hand you the house, the retirement account, and 5 years of support. Just stay patient. Let him think he's winning. Then we bury him in court. The final message had come in only 3 days earlier. I know it seems like a gamble, but it'll pay off. He's just an HVAC tech. We're smarter. We're better. We'll take it all. I downloaded every message onto a flash drive and called my attorney. By Monday, we were seated across from Chloe's new legal team, this time in Gerald Hoffman's former office. Her replacement counsel was a sharp, composed woman from the county seat who specialized, as she phrased it, in contentious divorces. She began smoothly. "My client is ready to make a reasonable offer," she said. "She'll settle for 60% of marital assets and 3 years of alimony." My lawyer remained expressionless. "And in return?" he asked flatly. "Discretion," she answered. "No media drama, no criminal complaints against your client." I leaned in slightly. "And what about the phone?" I asked. Her attorney raised an eyebrow. "What phone?" "The one she used to plan an affair and a fraudulent legal strategy," I said evenly. Chloe stiffened. "I have no idea what he's referring to." I slid the flash drive across the table. 17 voicemails from her lover, detailing exactly how to stage abuse claims and strip me of my assets. "Want me to play one now, or would you prefer to review them privately?" The attorney picked up the drive with careful fingers. "This may be unlawfully obtained material." "Wrong," I replied. "I found it in my own house, in a donation box. I'm legally allowed to possess it." 20 minutes later, the mood in the room had changed completely. The terms were rewritten. Chloe would walk away with 20% of our shared assets, enough to move and restart her life, but not enough to coast. No spousal support, no lies about abuse, no further accusations. In return, I agreed not to press charges for fraud, not to leak the audio, and not to file a civil suit over the affair. "There's one more thing," I added. "She needs to make a public retraction." Her attorney frowned. "Of what?" "The false claims she made about me," I said. "She needs to admit they were lies, driven by spite, not truth." Chloe's jaw clenched. "I'm not doing that." "Then we'll play those recordings in court," I said calmly. She signed the agreement that same day. By Sunday, her retraction was printed in the town paper. I, Chloe Collins, formally retract all previous allegations of domestic abuse against my estranged husband, Nate Collins. These claims stemmed from personal resentment and do not reflect the truth of our relationship. Nate never harmed or threatened me in any way. I deeply regret the harm my false statements may have caused to his character and reputation. It appeared on page 6, but in a town like ours, no one missed it. In small communities, word travels fast, especially when it's about betrayal, false accusations, and church scandal. I was beneath my truck, draining the oil pan, when Luis pulled into the driveway without warning. "So, it's all wrapped up now?" he asked, squinting down at me. "The legal stuff?" 60 more days, and the divorce is final," I told him. "And Damon?" "Gone. Moved to Atlanta last week. His dad landed him a job at one of those giant churches, congregation in the thousands. No one there knows about his little baptism scandal by the pool." Luis laughed under his breath. "And Chloe?" "She disappeared. Took her cut, 20%. And according to what I've heard, she's living with her sister in Phoenix now." "You doing all right?" I wiped the grease from my hands with a worn shop rag and glanced around the neighborhood. The same driveways, the same mailboxes and manicured lawns. Yet everything felt subtly different, like it belonged to me again. "Yeah," I said with a nod. "I think I'm finally okay." That evening, I made my way back to Trinity Baptist for the first time since the night of the fundraiser. The lot was nearly empty. Maybe 20 people still showed up for Wednesday night service now. I stayed parked, watching through the windows as the faithful few carried on with what was familiar. Pastor Rivers was back behind the pulpit. He looked smaller somehow, grayer, slower. A few elders, some silver-haired women sitting in their usual places, a couple of young families with toddlers in tow. The church still stood, it always would. But something had shifted. It felt more cautious now, more careful about who it chose to trust with leadership. The scandal had left a scar, Proof that even the pastor's own son could fall, and that a wife who quoted scripture could still betray her vows. Maybe there was wisdom in that. I turned the key and drove home. The next morning, I had 3 HVAC installs lined up. Frank was glad to have me back on the crew full-time. The work was hard, honest, and restorative. It gave structure to the pieces I was putting back together. That night, I reheated some cold pizza and ate it on the living room couch, the same one where Chloe used to fold laundry while half-watching cooking shows. The house was silent, except for the soft rhythm of the furnace cycling on and off. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from an unknown number lit up the screen. "Hope you're happy. You destroyed everything." I deleted it without hesitation. 10 minutes later, another message came through. "We could have fixed it. All you had to do was forgive." I erased that one too. While brushing my teeth, a third message arrived. "This isn't over." That one I kept. I forwarded it to my lawyer just to be safe. But I didn't feel fear. They'd gone all in and lost. Chloe and Damon had bet everything on deception and ended up empty-handed. Their names? Tarnished. Their power? Gone. Their secrets? Uncovered. And me? I didn't break the way they expected. Later, I walked into the bedroom and opened the closet. Her side was still bare, empty hangers where her clothes used to be. Maybe tomorrow I'd buy a few new shirts to fill the space. Or maybe I'd leave it untouched. That decision was mine now. I shut off the lights and slid under the covers. My bed, my house, my life, on my terms, and for the first time in a long while I slept straight through till sunrise.